which is just a moment. We'll be talking about teacher-student interactions and management and on-campus and online courses. And we certainly want you to interact with us and be a part of it. We'll take a brief break again at 2:30, and then at 2:45, Leah Collum from the Graduate School will be having a session, particularly for international students, on navigating the U.S. classroom. So if you're an international student and you are teaching or you hope to teach, then that session is specifically for you. We also want to mention that we will have a certificate available for those of you that have attended this conference, so you can look out for that in the future as well. But we certainly appreciate you being here. We apologize again if you're not able to see the chat and participate through the chat. But for this next session, it's particularly important that you do participate. So be prepared to raise your hand and offer your suggestions and your insight as we go through. So this particular session then has to do with managing the classroom, teacher-student interaction, and managing the classroom. And so what we're going to do is show you a number of different video scenarios involving teacher-student interaction. And we're going to pause at the end of each session, and then we'll ask you some questions and get some feedback, and we'll talk about maybe experiences. So all of you who have been a part of it today, Dr. Fleener, Dr. Kim, Dr. Sauter, Dr. Austin, Dr. Dombrowski, Dr. Cavallo, and myself will all be chiming in with our experiences, but we'd like you to either ask questions or offer your experiences. Maybe you've experienced this kind of situation. So let's start off with the first one. Anne, you got anything you need to add?
No, I think, again, we mentioned it earlier that a student took this on as a summer project. I mean, a class, broadcast communication class. And so they came up with the scripts and the video, and they did everything. We just recruited some students who were around in the summer, including some of our own graduate students, to be participants as students and to act, it's acting. So keep in mind, however, that gives us a good springboard for discussion about issues that may happen and how you should handle them. So, or just some suggestions. Of course, there's a lot of experienced people here who can contribute to that. So, we'll, if we get time gets into the way, we'll start showing maybe 2 or 3 at once instead of just 1 at a time, but we'll start out with 1 at a time and go from there.
Okay, here's the first one.
Hey, how's it going, Professor? Hey. You have a second?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I received a B on this paper, and I know for a fact it's an A paper.
Well, did you look at the rubric that I posted?
Of course I did.
I mean, I could look at it, but...
No. You're gonna look at it. I've never made a B. All the years I've been in school, I'm an A student. You know that. You've graded all my previous papers. I'm not leaving here until you regrade it and give me a better grade.
What grades are due today?
I don't care.
Okay. So.
Okay, has anyone out there had any issues with the student arguing about a grade in any way, or just discussing or unhappy with a grade? And if so, what did you do to address it? Raise your hand if you want to talk. Or just go ahead. We have Sherby. Ma'am, go ahead.
I would just, explain to, I would really listen to him and hear him out and, let him know if he had previously gotten all A's, I would let him know that, I understand your frustration and you have previously gotten all A's, and that is excellent. So let's take a look at the rubric and see, and look at the exam, and just go through it. And we'll talk this thing through, because at the end of the day, I want to be fair with you. and I would just really, walk him through the exam and, prove the score. And yeah, so that's how I would have acknowledge.
I like how you're calm. I like you have a calm voice, right? So that you immediately try to de-escalate the situation. And you can even say, come to my, put some time in between that moment and come to my office hours. So that way things maybe calm down.
Good, that's a good idea.
And then, because depending on how angry the student is, sometimes they're not angry. They may not be angry. They just may be asking. So but yes, that calm response and saying, like you said, you just said, acknowledge that, okay, let me look at it. You're not just saying, well, no, your grade stands, blah, blah, go away. So that's just going to escalate, right? So you have to think about how do we calm down the situation. So a lot of times we say, okay, come in a couple hours back. I'm going to finish this up and then let's talk about it later. And then, he thought, yeah, just time to calm down. What else? I thought
Daniel, you had one, yeah. Then you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think I would have said something similar to that. I'll calm down the student and request him to be patient. I check my key and try to show to him or demonstrate to him if he got it wrong. So that way I would like to convince him that what I gave him is fair. So, so the most important thing is to listen to the student and try to show him what he didn't get right, and try to encourage him.
Right. That backup that both of you have mentioned is really important. That you have that rubric to back up your decision on the grade as well. But to say it in, like you said, a calming way.
So we de-escalate the situation. We're not doing anything to inflame the situation anymore, but speaking, calmly, and again, inviting the student to office hours as opposed to feeling the pressure to have to come up with an answer right then, but being willing to remove yourself a little bit from just that particular situation. Okay, here's the second one.
Okay, so does anybody remember what we talked about last time? Bailey?
Sorry, I didn't read the chapter.
Jason?
What? What did you say?
Preetham?
Sorry, ma'am, I didn't hear you.
Okay, has this ever happened to you where the students are, I used to call this apathetic class. They're not engaged. They're just falling asleep. What do you do? What did the teacher maybe do wrong that could have been improved? Or what would you do in either case to engage the students? Sherby, is that a remnant, or do you have a comment on that? Your hand is up still. Okay. Luis.
Hi, this is Luis. It's obvious that the professor didn't have a good hook for the students, which I would do first. And I would try to make them engaged, but also it's related to what I think Dr. Cavallo mentioned in the morning regarding the social contract. If we somehow make a good social contract among all the students, then everyone will be responsible of their own learning, which is the final objective. Because on the other hand, it's really impossible for the teacher to be motivating all the students one by one. Everyone should be responsible, but the teacher also is responsible for providing a good hook and good quality of instruction.
Right. I think you're right. And the engagement piece wasn't there. It was just like, does anyone remember what we did last time? That's really not the students' fault that they aren't thinking about your class that they had 2 days ago, or maybe even last week, and can immediately say, here's what we did last week. So the way it was, we did this on purpose, but the way they ask the question is something that causes intrigue and engagement. And if you can, some of the techniques that Gautam mentioned about think, pair, share, the other thing is they could talk to a partner or someone and say, answer some kind of intriguing question that's on the board, or something that gets them back into that class and helps them to be engaged. What else? Who else has ideas on that?
Well, Dr. Cavalli, I can add to that. Now, I understand that rooms setups could be a little difficult, but just based on what I saw, the desks were set up in rows and they weren't even allowing the opportunity for some collaboration together. So that would have been one thing I would have told my elementary teachers, move those desks so they can actually talk to each other instead of looking at you as the professor. They can work together a little bit more. So, but I understand that there's some room allotments or sizes that can't be done here on campus that, it's a little more challenging, but get them opportunities to collaborate.
I love that. Love that, Beth. That the old way of learning, it's a remnant of the 50s, and even earlier, where people are in neat rows to learn, and that was, more of a kind of factory model. And we've been trying for years and years to change it to be more of a collaborative space. And yeah, rearrange the desks and you're going to get more response and interaction. Amy.
I was just going to mention, in addition to having the guiding questions for the students, also something that's very helpful is pair share before they present to the class, or group share. And so sending them to a channel on Teams, or sending them to a different, I've created different teams in one of my classes where each team has five students in it, and sending them there to kind of test out ideas first and then come back to the group, because sometimes people with those cold call questions, they're not going to necessarily come forth with those. And so that really helps the pair share or the group share before asking questions like that.
Perfect. Exactly. Yep. They're more comfortable sharing and posing something together than on their own. I know that helps a lot. And they have time to think about it, you know what I mean? Have a good answer, not just something quick.
Okay, let's look at number 3. In the interest of time, let's move along. And here's 3.
Please have a seat. Well, it's been a few weeks since I've seen you in class. I wonder, is everything okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Have you been going to your other classes?
I try to.
Try to, I see. Well, it's just that it's been a while since I've seen you. I'm a little concerned. Has something changed in your life?
There's just a lot going on right now. I mean, my boyfriend broke up with me, my car's breaking down, and I'm just so tired. School's not important to me right now.
Okay, so you have a student come to you, and the student hasn't been in class, and so you ask maybe to meet with the student, and then that's what you hear. Mm-hmm. So how would you deal with that situation?
And it could also be that they don't interact or participate online as well. So think of it both ways. Yeah. Any hands on that one? See now, we got Sherby. What do you think, Sherby?
I don't know. I'm just gonna shoot for it since I'm personally, I think he handled it real good. His tone and the way he said, he leaned forward, the contact, I felt like he was really concerned about her. So I would listen and hear her out and just, let her know, I know there's a lot going on, but, since you are in school, you know, part of your grading is attendance, is showing up. So I would probably refer her to maybe one of our counseling services, because she might be in some kind of depression, and you know, go from there. But and yet still encourage her, you know, and work with her to get caught up, and you know, just ask what I can do to help you. And I do understand, but I would, you know, set up some SMART goals with her if she's willing to do that. And then I would also refer her to our counseling service so she could kind of process some of these things, since there has been a sudden change in her behavior, and that kind of thing. So yeah.
You're exactly right in that, and we've done this session when we've also had the Office of Student Conduct, Dan Moore, come and speak to us too. And one of the advice, one of the things that he told us was, faculty shouldn't be afraid to ask students some questions like, you know, have you considered suicide, or are you suicidal? He said, you may be the only person that has asked them that, and that may be the difference. And it's not to put a sort of a guilt trip or anything on faculty, but he said, you know, he advised that is a fair question. If you're seeing some signs or you're not sure, and you're exactly right to referring them to the counseling service, and when we do have a great counseling service at UTA. So
exactly. We also have the behavioral intervention team, the BIT. So that can be called. So it happened in my program on campus, where a student, some of the students reported that they thought anyway. So it happened with one of our students that we thought the student was depressed, and so.
Muting us. There you go.
Who is muting us?
I'm not sure. There you go.
Okay. Behavioral intervention team is what I was going to say. They will come and check on students that you fear may be in trouble. And then Daniel had, I thought, his hand up a minute ago.
Yes. When I listened to the faculty, I thought he started well. I think he was in the right direction. We don't know how they resolve the situation, but I think he did very well, and that's the way I will do it. Hopefully at the end, assuming this is a practical case, he was able to help these students come back to course.
I just want to mention too, for an online situation, even if you teach an asynchronous class, or whether it's synchronous, however it is, if you know that a student is not regularly attending your course, and maybe it looks like it's affecting their grade, there is a tool available for faculty called Inspire for Faculty. And if you haven't seen that, it should be on the menu on the left-hand side of your Canvas page if you're teaching a course. And one of the greatest benefits that I've found, and I know other people have with Inspire, is that it enables you to reach out to students in your class with an email that's directed and addressed to that particular student. So it looks like you're sending them an individual email, even though you may be sending it to others in the class. So you could just send an email, and Inspire will tell you whether students have high or low engagement in your class. And really, that's up to you to kind of judge what engagement means. But you can send out that email and just say, I've noticed that you haven't been in class recently, and I was just wondering, you know, how you're doing, if anything's wrong, if I can help you out. And you may want to send that out to, you know, 4 or 5 students, or 10 or 15, or just one. But Inspire allows you to send out those emails, and that's often a very, very good way in an online environment to reach out to a student and just to establish contact.
Amy, your hand is up.
Yes, I was just going to mention, just as an anecdote, that I did have a student 2 semesters ago disappear in one of my courses, and you know, a lot of people assume that they disappear out of lack of interest, but this student, in fact, didn't understand a reading and was too afraid to come to class because he felt dumb. And so he decided to just not show up for an entire week due to anxiety. And so we helped to work him through that, by reaching out, and he ended up with an A in the course. So
Fabulous.
It's really worth it to reach out to students.
Right. Well, what we don't want to do is to counsel them, but advise them to counseling. Or if we think it's a dangerous situation, then refer them to the BIT team I mentioned, or the counseling services directly. Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, let's play the next video then, and see how it goes.
So, what are you doing this weekend?
Okay, so as you know, we're going to talk a little bit about board carrying my best life.
Yeah, I know. I'd be like,
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the board carrying type and the carrying type. You stupid. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the commonest, the developmental, and the regulations.
Right. I gotta have my shoes right.
Okay, so
Yeah, that's true.
All right, a disruptive student.
You ever have students talking while you're trying to give a lesson? And what do you do? How do you get them to not interrupt? Now, the teacher here did stop and look at them, but then they went right back to it. So there's something there we can talk about also. Obia Gully? Sorry if I'm mispronouncing.
My name is Obiagelingu, and I think for this kind of situation, it's always good for the professor to spell out the rules and regulations, how to comport yourself in class, what are the do's and don'ts in the syllabus, because for some will just, give the rules and remind the students, this is what we agreed at the beginning of the class, that these are our do's and the don'ts. So people should keep to it.
Okay. And Sherby, did you want to contribute?
This would be a tough one for me, but she mentioned that we should just, make sure in one of the first classes to really set up the class rules, being respectful, not talking, not only when the professor's talking, but anyone else. So the teacher was, I probably would have been a little more assertive, is my style, because I'm older. So I kind of got this thing about respect. So I would have asked them to not talk among one another, while I was late, because, they were interfering with learning process of others. And then if it continued, I would actually probably ask them to maybe leave the class until they decided they could come back in and, really show respect for the professor and the other students.
Right. Yeah, I think that was one of the problems was you could have the rules, but then sometimes they might start talking again. So either you do something more like, say, I usually approach it not necessarily in a negative way, but something like, I'll wait, or don't start until, if you ask for quiet, don't start again until every single person does what you asked for. This is one of the things that's basic in teaching, is that if you say, I need your attention, or pay attention, or look up here, or please, focus, or whatever you want to say, be quiet, then that means every single person does what you say before you start. Because if you start without getting that, then they start to not believe what you say. They lose respect little by little, because they think you don't mean what you say. So there's ways, you can call on them, one of them to answer a question. You can You can say something, you can go closer to them, walk up to them and say, you know, need you to pay attention. You can start out nicer and then eventually, but respectful, and then eventually, you know, I wouldn't resort to kicking them out immediately. I would try different strategies first and then move on. Beth, I know you've got lots of experience in this, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Beth.
Oh yes, I got quite a lot of experience. Another thing about disruptive thing that you guys didn't mention is cell phones. And so you have to, it's not just the students that are talking, but it's the cell phones as well. You know, you spend all this time preparing a fabulous lesson or activity, and they're spending all their time on the cell phone. So you need to set the policy about cell phones. I allowed the students to have their cell phones out because I taught an evening class and some of them had families or things like that. But I didn't encourage them to, if you had a phone ringing or texting, don't do that in my class. They can wait, you know, things like that. So you need to make sure you set the expectations of even cell phone use to not disrupt your class and things. I wanted to clarify on that one too. It's not just talking students.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You're exactly right. I've several times I'll just stop in the middle of a lecture and I'll just look in the direction of the students, and then the class will turn around and look too, and then that's enough to stop them. Or, you know, with the cell phone, I'll tell the students, you know, I expect you to be paying attention, not to be on your phones, and that if something is that urgent or that pressing or it's that important, then you need to step outside and you know, take care of it. But you don't want it to happen in class. You're right, Beth.
Yeah, but you know, don't let it continue and get out of hand. You know, some of teaching is acting, so you may have to, you know, just learn that teacher look. I taught high school first, you know, and I had a teacher look, and they knew what it meant because I didn't start until every single person understood that I'm not going to start until you're all quiet. And then some of the students who are very interested in their grades and in learning, you know, they can put pressure on the other students too. It doesn't mean you have to yell ever. You don't have to be angry. You just have to address it, though. You don't let it go. You have to address it.
So, but you also model that type of behavior as well. I mean, if you don't want students to be on the cell phone, then you shouldn't have the cell phone out when you're teaching or they're doing something, or you don't disrupt them when they're trying to share something else. So you try to model the behavior that you're wanting in your classroom as well.
Absolutely. Mutual respect. Set that up early on. I think Luis said
one more. Yeah, Luis, and then we'll go on.
Thank you. Well, as you mentioned, non-verbal clues are really important. And I was going to add that not only cell phones, but also computers, because some students like to have their computers open. And the other thing that I would recommend, based on my experience, is to document everything. Because sooner or later, especially with disruptive students, you might need documentation to prove that they have been. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. That is so true. All right.
All right, let's look at the next one.
Hey, Professor, can I talk to you for a moment?
Sure, have a seat.
So it's about my classmates. They're always showing up late. They're not answering to any of my messages. And I just don't think it's fair that they're getting the same grade that I am when I'm the one doing all the work. Can I just do this on my own or something?
Okay, that's something that we talked about sort of earlier today when we were talking about teamwork and that kind of thing. But it's a common problem and a common issue, is that students work together in groups or teams, and one student feels like they're doing more than their fair share. And so, I mean, we went over a lot of strategies and things, but is there anything else that you'd like to add to that?
One of the things I would be careful of is, you know, going to address the student that student may be complaining about, because if that's the right word, because then it puts that student on the spot, and it makes that student uncomfortable. So You might have conferences with all the groups and check in and see how all of them are doing, to not single out the one. And so we talked about, some faculty mix up groups every project. I think that works too, depending on your class and what your goals are. But also to lay out, like we said earlier, the guidelines of what it means to be a good group member, and to allow opportunity to really grade each other in some percentage of the grade. I mean, life is to work together. They've got to figure it out at some point.
All right, let's watch number 6.
Okay, so you have your test. Are there any questions?
Hey, this is not really a question, but I think that this test had some topics that we didn't cover in class.
Yeah, I just feel like it was unnecessarily difficult. Like, it was harder than it needed to be.
Yeah, I did all the questions on the review, and there was literally no question on the review on the test.
I just don't think it was a fair test. I don't want to be rude, but I felt like there were a lot of trick questions in this. So.
So you have an exam, you hand back the exam, and students start to complain. Has that ever happened? My policy in my class, I teach a large class. I've had 120 or so in the class when we were face-to-face. And my policy very much is that they'll know what their grade is because I post it on Canvas. But I don't go over or review the exam in the class. Number one, it takes time. Number two, I will say I'll let them know what the top score was, what the average was in the class, and so that gives them a perspective as to where they stand. But then I'll also let people know that if you do have questions or you do have concerns or comments, then that's what my office hours are for, and they can come and I'll go over the exam with them and talk to them about it. And that way, then the onus is on the student to be able to take the necessary steps if they have questions. And what I found is the majority of students aren't interested in coming and following up. But if you start to open up things, and I mean, it depends on the type of exam and that kind of thing too, but if you open up stuff in class, then you're starting to open up the possibility of that herd mentality where one starts to complain and then somebody else complains, and before you know it, you're being ganged up on. And as a professor, it's very easy to get on the defensive, and you don't want to do that.
Exactly. So similar to the first one, think about de-escalating. Don't let it go on. And so I'm sorry you feel that way, but here's my office hours. Come see me, bring your test, and let's talk, or whatever, like Dr. Clark said. You don't want to handle it there and let it continue, and don't respond in an angry way at all. The way to address an angry situation is with very calm, soothing voice. I'm sorry you feel that way, or I'm sorry you don't, let me take a look. Come to my office hours and we'll talk about it. Beth, you wanted to comment?
Well, I was going to add on the perspective of that. I do something very similar to Dr. Clark as well. They come to office hours and we go over the exam question by question with them if they have an issue. But then also myself as the professor, if I get the test back and I found that question number 7, everyone was missing it, I have to find out why. Mm-hmm. And maybe I didn't teach it, or maybe the question is worded a little bit odd that students were actually struggling with it. And as a professor, I need to be willing to go, okay, so maybe just throw that question away, or we look at it and try to figure it out. Just because, not say it's a bad question, but it could have written just a little bit odd, or we didn't quite cover it in class or something in that nature. So on your side, you need to also be reflective, just like they're coming in asking questions. You need to reflect back on yourself too, to make sure that you covered what you said was on the test.
And that's a really good point. And I've found myself in that situation a couple of times. I'll look and I'll see, over 70% of the students didn't get that question right. And what I've found sometimes is that the way that I read a question, sometimes is completely different from the way that a student reads a question. That and sometimes, you know, I'll even encourage them if we're having an in-class exam and you know, say, if you don't understand a question, come and talk to me, because experience, I've dictated that. I mean, I've found that through experience, that oftentimes students will get so bogged down in the question, and then they'll read into it, and before you know it, they're all the way, you know, down the street from where they should be. And so, you know, I'll tell them, you know, if you're struggling with a question, you can't, you know, you're finding you're not understanding it, come and talk to me, and I can either explain it in class, or like you said, after the fact, if I look through and I see that the majority didn't, then, you know, I'll try and understand. Was it something I wrote? Or I'll ask some of the students and go, you know, listen, this is the way that I interpreted it. How did you interpret from your perspective when you read it, and see what they say.
Very good. Excellent. There's nothing wrong with admitting that, okay, this was an unfair question, I think, so I'm going to give everyone credit, or whatever way you decide to handle it. So they appreciate that. It shows your humanness.
Okay, let's go on to the next one.
Look, I went over your exam and you didn't do too well, so I'm concerned.
I've really been trying. I'm not sure what else I can do. I've been doing all the papers and extra work that you gave me. I'm not sure what else I can do, but I have to pass this course.
You've been doing your work, your extra work, but I'm concerned about your exams.
Are you able to give me like a makeup exam day or any other type of extra credit? Like I really have to pass this course, and I don't know what else I could do. I've tried everything.
Similar yet different. You have a student who insists that they're doing everything that they can do, but you know, ultimately, and I had this situation just recently, not with me, but I heard about it from another faculty member, where the student isn't taking responsibility, where the student's trying to, you know, almost pass responsibility onto somebody else. Well, you know, it's not my fault. I'm doing everything, but I'm not getting it, so therefore it must be you. And maybe sometimes it is us, and maybe sometimes we do need to evaluate the way that we're explaining something. But if it's just one student like that, what do you do?
Mm-hmm. And then the policy of extra credit is also tied in here.
Right.
Whether one student asking for extra credit, and I would say one word to that, and that's no. That's it. You cannot give special extra credit to one student. You know, it's something you would have to have set up early for everyone to have the opportunity, because even your A students that are getting a 92 want to get a 100. So they're going to want extra credit too. And it's not fair to give it to those who come in and ask you for extra credit. Can't do it. It's not fair. Go ahead.
I had a student one time ask me, he's like, he was asking me about his grade or something. I said, you're doing great. And I said, you're getting an A. He said, but I want a higher A. I'm like, there's no such thing as a higher A. No, I said, just, I mean, you know, but you've got those that are motivated and really want to do more. And then I one of the biggest lessons I learned when I was in graduate school, and a student came to me and said, what do I have to do to pass the class? And so I sort of was telling him, well, you need to do this. He said, no, what's the lowest grade I can get and still pass the class? Oh. And I said a D, and he was just ecstatic. And that's all he wanted was a D to pass the class. He didn't care about anything else, but he just needed that D, and that's all and he was willing to give as much effort as it took to get a D, and nothing more. So you've got, you know, two spectrum. Beth, yeah.
Okay, I think I see two situations here with the student in itself. One, and this is something the student's responsibility. If the student did have some sort of learning or other type of disabilities, it's a student's responsibility to let you know within the first couple courses start of this class that they do have additional accommodations for anything, so that you need to be aware that if this student came in and he had extra time or any other accommodations, that you need to make sure you met them for his any disabilities or have. Another one, it could just be strew out the student is actually really anxious about tests themselves. It's not necessarily, but they're nervous because they got to pass this class, they got to graduate. And so the pressure they're putting on themselves to pass is actually hindering him from being successful on the exams, because it sounded like he's doing well on the other work. It's just the exams. So then provide or opportunities for, okay, so take deep breaths, relax, you know, so all of those things to help loosen the anxiety that he may have, or if there's accommodations that you have to give as well. So you have to consider that side as well.
Thank you, Beth. That's excellent. And
That's good, yes.
there is tutoring and support too available that you can refer them to free. The Idea Center, for one, has it tutoring.
And legally, you know, as a faculty member, if a student comes and presents the letter, or now it's delivered digitally, you know, as from what was the Office of Students with Disabilities is now the Student Access and Resource Center. As a faculty member, we are obliged to do what is required in that letter. But like Beth said, if a student doesn't provide you with documentation, then you know you're not legally obliged to make any concessions. But you know, again, it may be just a matter of you know, providing them with some techniques for test anxiety or something like that, or suggesting that they go and visit, you know, SARS and see what, you know, they can help you out with, or help them out with. Okay, let's go to number 8.
Hi, Professor. You have a moment to talk real quick?
Yeah, come on in. Take a seat. What's going on?
Well, I just wanted to talk because I'm having difficulty in your class, but I'm not having difficulty in any of my other classes. Probably, I mean, because I have real professors teaching them, but I just want to transfer out of your class.
So what's going on? You've been doing your homework?
Yeah, I do the homework, I do all the assignments, but I feel like they're way too difficult, and they're not difficult in any of my other classes. I just feel like I need a professor with more experience.
Okay, so your graduate students, have you ever been faced with a situation where a student came and said, you just don't have the experience and that's why I'm not doing well, or I would like to have a real professor, somebody who is an actual faculty member? Anybody? Raise your hand if you've experienced that, and if you haven't, that's fine too, but I'm just curious.
Well,
it does happen. It does happen where and I remember, and it's sort of vague, but I do remember as a graduate student, Thomas says he frequently had them ask for another teacher if they're repeating the course. Yeah, I can see that. But I remember as a graduate student, you know, students trying to, even if they didn't quite come out 100% and say you're not a real teacher, sort of infer that you just don't have the experience that they deserve, or something like that, which is why I've always, at the beginning of each semester, not in a defensive way, but just in a conversational way as I'm introducing myself, outline what my experience is, how long I've been teaching, what my professional background is. Before I became a professor, I was a professional broadcaster for X number of years, and so I just outline that again in an introduction in a conversational way, and that seems to sort of allay any kind of sense of, well, you don't, you know, have it. I mean, even as a graduate student, it's never to apologize that, well, I'm only a graduate student, I'm sorry, but I'll do the best I can kind of thing. It's just to be very confident in who you are and what your experience is, and the fact that you've been asked to and given the opportunity to teach the class. So obviously, you know, whoever's your chair or whoever it is, knows that you have the experience and the ability to be able to teach that class, or they wouldn't have asked you. And so it's never apologizing, but just being confident and you know, it goes a long way, I think. Dr. Cavallo, anything you want to add?
Yeah, it's the same thing. You know, when I started out, I was a young professor, so sometimes some of my students were pretty close in my age. I mean, a graduate student, a young GTA and professor, but GTA. And so, yeah, they might look at you like, well, you don't really know what you're talking about. Well, I had really good backup with my professors, and I also had the credentials and could say, you know, trust me, I've got the background. I'd like to know, and maybe press them for a little bit more explanation to be more specific about, okay, so what exactly are you having trouble with? I'm open to feedback from my students always. And so tell me a little bit more detail what you'd like to see, and kind of turn it back to them to explain to you why there's, what it is that's bothering them. And also just, don't yield to the, well, you're not experienced enough thing, because you are, or you wouldn't be here. So you have the credentials or you wouldn't be here. And that's, or your age shouldn't matter or any of that. You just, definitely stand up for yourself and have good backup with your professors in terms of them having your back if students complaining. It doesn't mean they can't transfer out of your class, but I would have them talk to you about specifics and see if they can articulate. I don't know. That was a good suggestion I've heard. And what do you think about that?
Dr. Cavallo, I agree with you on that one, because they could be struggling in your class compared to their other classes, is because you're actually challenging them to grow and do more than compared to the other classes, which they're kind of maybe just skating by and things like that. So they're struggling because you're actually could be challenging them to think, and to think more critical, and to develop all of those things. And that's where, like you were saying, go back and ask them the pointed questions to see if you can help narrow down really what is the issue. It's just not an attack against you as a new-ish professor or the new person of the class. Find out what actually was going on.
Yeah, I once got a feedback survey. You always remember the ones that the students give you feedback on your class. You always remember. Most of them could be wonderful. You could have one that's not great, and all of a sudden that's the one you remember. But the one I remembered was that it was the course was difficult and challenging, and I didn't answer questions, and I made them have to think. But it was I don't even know if it was she, just majority of class was he was not happy because I made them work hard. So that was actually in the course, in the evaluation. So I thought, well, that's actually kind of a compliment, maybe, because I don't want
backhanded compliment. Yeah.
Yeah. But the student wasn't happy because I made them work hard. Oh well. But thank you, Beth. That is a good point.
Yeah. All right, number 9.
Professor, I'm having trouble with question 3.
Question 3?
Yeah.
Here, let's take a look. No, you're just not using the formula correctly here. We take this quotation here and place it here. That'll solve your problem.
Well, you made it seem so easy. I think I'm starting to like this subject because of you now.
Oh, I love it too.
Oh, well, I guess I'm done now. If you're not doing anything after class, can I come to your office and we can finish it?
One word?
Yep. No. That's my also one word answer. Absolutely.
One word. No. Amy got it. Yes. No.
Yeah, you have to be careful of anything like that. And just if you sense anything, you keep, if it's an in-person, obviously keep the door open, or have other people around, or meet in a classroom where it's open, and you're not putting yourself in a situation that could be very uncomfortable. So that's some of the things to do. We would definitely discourage that. And if there's texting that you shouldn't have, I mean, I don't share my cell phone number with students because I really wouldn't want to, but you just have to put an end to any kind of interaction like that if they're your student. And they may see you, because you're a graduate student, as more of a peer. But you have to keep that line friendly but not friends. There's a line between you as the teacher and them as the student. And I know that being a graduate student, you're in an awkward kind of in-between situation. You are a student, but you're also a teacher. But when you're dealing with your students and you're in the classroom, there is a line, and you have to be on the teacher side of everything and all your decisions. And if you run into trouble, do consult with your faculty advisor, because they can give you help with that. Anything else? Anyone ever have that happen or have to deal with it? Do you want to keep your position? Do you want your job? So the answer is no.
And again, according to Dan Moore, I mean, this does happen, and so it's something that his office has dealt with, and yeah, it's one of the first things that I was ever taught or told as a graduate student was, when you meet with students, keep your door open, never shut your door, and it was just, and it's for everybody's sake, and so yeah, it's just don't even entertain it. Let's look at number 10. Okay, so cheating in a face-to-face environment, obviously, but it's also goes on in an online environment, and the two biggest issues that we're hearing about, and I know it's not just at UTA, but it's around the nation as classes have switched to online. The two biggest issues have been, number one, how do I engage my students in an online environment? And number two, what about cheating? How do I protect or maintain the integrity of my exam? And what Dr. Cavallo and I and others have been talking about all summer, and conducting some seminars and different things throughout the summer, is talking about assessment and changing the way that you assess. So the way that you assess in a face-to-face class may be different from the way that you have to assess in an online environment. And so it may mean rewriting questions, may mean thinking about, using software to protect the integrity of your exam, whether it's Proctorio or whether it's Lockdown Browser or some of the others. But I know also nationwide, again, I'm seeing a lot of comments where people are saying students are rebelling against Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor, in part because of privacy concerns, because they object to having a camera that shows their surroundings or their environment while they're taking an exam. And there are a lot of evidently forceful complaints from students in many different institutions. And so I think that, the changing the way that you assess, thinking about, it gets back to almost what Dr. Fleener and Dr. Kim were talking about in the very first session, and that is, what are our outcomes in the course? What is it that we want our students to learn, and then how can we assess those outcomes? But maybe how can we assess those outcomes in new and creative ways, so that we're not just relying on multi-choice exams or others where maybe students can cheat, where maybe students can share the answers and that kind of stuff, but thinking of different ways of assessing the things that we want our students to learn.
Exactly. So we've been working with faculty on alternative assessments and different ways to measure throughout their experience more authentically, which means as they're learning, to continue to gauge their learning. And it can be just short evaluations, not the big long 50 question test that they have to sit still for and answer multiple choice, but there's a lot of other ways to assess learning. So we can, in our follow-up sessions, we can have a session for the graduate students on that specific topic to give you some ideas of how you can assess learning and really measure real learning and not guessing. There's so many different techniques available. But for your on-campus classes, have a policy in terms of put your backpacks up front, or what, because obviously everyone had some different way that they could find that they potentially could be cheating. There was no definite evidence, but then it certainly was suspicious. So the other thing is to proctor. That teacher was grading papers and not watching. And so a lot of times I stand in the back of the class because then they don't know where I'm looking, and or I walk around a little bit quietly, spread the students out, have different versions of the exam, different techniques to use, but start right from the beginning with policies on cell phones and that kind of thing for tests.
I need to tell you a funny that I used to do. I had large classes, like 42 big exams, and it was a lot of work. So I had the same exam, final exam, but I put a different number on the top. So I had like exam number, like 1 through 5. So the students thought they all had different exams, and really it wasn't only the same exam, but they couldn't, they're like, they thought I had multiple versions of the same exam, but I didn't, because I just didn't have time. And but it just, the psychological part of it made it really funny that they thought they had a different version of the exam, but they really didn't.
I've done exactly the same thing, except I've done different colored exams. So I gave a green, a purple, a white, and a blue, or something like that. And I want to make sure that it was alternating, and they were convinced that it was all different, and it wasn't. It was the same.
Love it.
Same exam. So
yeah, fabulous.
All right, I know we're getting short on time, but we got 2 more, so let's just go through those, and then we'll take a break, and then Leah Collum will talk about for particularly for international graduate students, but any and really that session is for anybody who's teaching, because maybe you're going to have international students in your course as well, and it'll be important for you to kind of understand how maybe they're approaching you. So, but that's coming up.
All right, everyone, go ahead and get in your project groups.
All right, y'all. Look, for this project, I think we ought to shoot at the UC Mall at that new stage.
Well,
No. What you saying?
I was thinking about the library mall, where there's more students that we could get a lot of people in
You're
the
right.
shop.
I'm sorry.
I think they're having an event at the MAC.
Look, we ought to start at the MAC and work our way to the library mall. But you know what? I'll shoot. I'm sorry. Look, I'll shoot it.
I'll do
shoot
the
it.
editing.
You gonna edit?
Yeah.
You go edit, and then I'll do the camera work.
Okay, bet. I'm sorry.
Does
But
everyone have a role for the project?
so basically, I'm gonna be shooting all the video, running the cameras, the cameraman for the group, really.
I've been working on my editing, so I think I'll stick to that.
I'm gonna be directing, having all my cameras and everybody in place so I can get all the shots that I'll need.
I guess I'll take notes or something. Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about your part?
Well, I'll have camera shots.
So again, it gets back to group projects. It gets back to roles, but it also gets back to the issue of, and then in this case, it's male versus female. It doesn't always have to be that way, but it is, and so you've got, but that even gender, aside, you've got several people that are obviously very dominant, and then you've got one or maybe two that sit back and in some way are taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm. So yes, it's important to recognize that and balance it, and that's where you set the guidelines early about sharing responsibilities, giving everyone a voice, being careful about that the roles that you set up are equitable and that they rotate roles. If you have different projects, they do different. Everyone gets a chance to do the different projects. In science, there's a lot of research that shows that the males tend to be the ones to do the experiments while the females sit back and take notes. Some of that's changing with time, thankfully, but it's not, to make it more equitable. We want equal opportunity to actually manipulate the lab equipment. But it still exists, and it could be the other direction. It could be that it doesn't matter. Any like Dr. Clark said, any group could just be a personality that just takes over. So you have to be sure to intervene, help them to equalize the roles and not have one dominate over the others.
All right. In the interest of time, let's move to the last one.
Okay, so today we're going to learn how to edit in Adobe Premiere. Does everyone have it open on your computer? Me? Okay, so who in here does have experience editing? That's awesome. So if you want to help out your fellow student anytime, that's fine. But we're going to go over the basics, starting with how you organize your clips and load up a new project in Adobe Premiere. So,
Hello.
And that's it. That's the last one. So dealing with disruptions in class, and I mean, again, applicable for both an online and face-to-face environment.
Right. Yep. Class disruptions. That kind of goes along with what Dr. Fleener mentioned about cell phones and taking calls while you're in class. And they were doing. And was also mentioned about students having their computer, maybe playing games while you're teaching. It's disruptions. So your
I would like, Dr. Cavallo, like you mentioned, because it's a computer-based lab type thing where they're actually doing things. The professor needs to actually walking, so she's in the back of the room looking forward onto the monitors, not just being always forward. So the students have to be able to be on the software that she's teaching and not shopping or doing what they're doing. So, yeah.
I actually had a graduate student like that who I could tell when I was standing at the front of the class, she had her laptop, and I could tell that even though she was pretending to take notes, she wasn't. So I would walk around behind. And it was so funny because I was just there, and as soon as I got close, I could see her switch out of her chat and to get it back on the screen. And as I walk away, I would get back, and so I would do like a little head fake and go back again. And it was causing her so much. It was causing her more effort than if she just stopped doing it. But so you're right. I mean, walking around behind them, letting them know that you're engaged in what they're doing. But Amy.
We had an incident at our faculty meeting yesterday where somebody fell asleep and didn't mute their microphone and they were snoring. And so maybe a possibility of something that would happen in an online setting, and just realizing, you can mute them or whatever. But it was quite an interest. We don't even know who it was. We still don't know who it was, but that might be something that happens in this setting.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's
Nellie.
Go ahead, Nellie.
So right now I'm actually teaching a class online and it's synchronous. So all the students have to be online at the same time, and it just happens to be 8 a.m. So not everyone wants to show their faces, or everyone did in the beginning, and starting with the third class now, there are fewer and fewer students. So without being able to see them on screen, the whole students getting distracted, it's becoming, or I feel like it will become like a bigger problem. So what I started to do was to remember to really try to engage them by like asking questions. And then if it's always the same students that are answering questions, then I would try to get them to do like group work, like by putting them into separate rooms and then get them to kind of communicate with each other. Because then at least if it's just two people, then they both have to talk, right? And if I feel like someone is really, really not participating, then I would kind of direct the question towards them, like not to make them feel, not to put them on the spot, but just to make sure that at least they're awake,
Right.
considering it is 8 a.m. Yeah, so those are some of the things that I would do.
I think, you know, the group part's really important. And I mean, I heard from a faculty member who said he found out that the students in the class had a group me chat going on, and he takes attendance at the beginning. And so students were showing up online at the beginning to get attendance, turning off their cameras, and then going away and doing stuff and relying on the group me chat where different class members would say, well, he's asking a question now, or you need to come back, or you need to do this. And seems like more effort than it's worth, but that's what they're doing. And so the more that you can engage them, you're right, Nellie, the more you can engage them in different activities, and the less the opportunity for them to be off doing other stuff.
Yeah, I think just like in any class, face-to-face class too, that you will call them, and if they know that you are going to call on them randomly and to respond and participate, then they're more apt to be ready, and they don't know who's going to be called on next. You know, you mix it up, and you so you have them all on kind of. It's okay to have them a little bit on edge. They don't know if you're going to call on them or not, and that's the responsibility. So it's our job to help them learn. That's our job, but it's their job to give back too. They have a responsibility as well in that class. So it goes both between you and the students. There's no teaching without them also learning and participating. So yes, so you can tell them up front, you can tell them anytime that I'm going to call on people, so you need to be ready to answer. And they will. So for the most part. Go ahead.
Okay, it's time now for a break. I know you guys have been patient. It's been a great session. Again, I wish the chat was working more, but still we appreciate your interaction over the course of the session. So we're going to take a break till 2:45. We're running just a few minutes behind schedule, and I want to make sure we give Leah all the time she needs. And so at 2:45 we'll come back, and Leah Cullum for the graduate school will be talking about international students and navigating the U.S. classroom. And again, this is for international students, but it's also for those of you who are going to be teaching and have international students in your class. And it'll be a great perspective on maybe, you know, what they're thinking and seeing, and just give you some insight as well. So we'll see you back in just a few minutes.
Okay.